Kira Thorne adjusted her flowing azure diplomatic robes and gazed at the massive gray fortress. Hanging in space before them, the Corvan battle station bristled with weapon ports, a stark contrast to her own vessel's gentle curves and crystal windows. Everything about the Corvan Empire seemed designed to intimidate. "First time seeing a Corvan stronghold?" asked Ambassador Finn Crestwood, joining her at the VIEWPORT. Kira nodded, steadying her voice. "It's so different from our cities. Everything looks built for war. That's exactly why we're here." Finn smiled gently. The Alien Republic believes even the most militant species can learn the value of peace. At 26, Kira was the youngest diplomatic liaison ever chosen for first contact. She had studied xenocultural relations, mastered 7 communication protocols, and dedicated her life to this moment. When scouts discovered the aggressive Corvan Empire expanding through nearby systems, the Council of Wisdom chose diplomacy over conflict. The communications console chimed. A tall figure in imposing black armor appeared on screen, stern, angular features marked with ritual scars that traced patterns across his temples. Alien vessel. He spoke in accented common Galactic. "I am War Regent Dryas Kor, Supreme Leader of the Corvan Empire. Docket Bay 7. Come unarmed and bring your tribute." The transmission ended abruptly. Kira frowned. "Tribute? We're here as equals seeking mutual benefit. Different cultures, different customs," Finn reassured her. "Perhaps their word for diplomatic gifts." 2 hours later, Kira walked through the docking tube carrying a crystalline case containing precious alien offerings, their greatest art and music, advanced healing technologies, and peaceful trade route charts. The Corvan station's corridors were stark and harsh, lined with portraits of conquering warriors. A squad of armored guards met them, led by a younger man who removed his helmet, revealing dark hair and fewer ritual scars than his leader. His bearing seemed more controlled than his companions. "I am Jackson Reeve, First Blade of the Crimson Legion," he announced. "I will escort you to the War Regent." As they walked, Kira noticed Jackson's difference from other Corvans. While his companions moved with casual arrogance, he showed more restraint, even shooting disapproving glances when they mocked lower-ranked workers. "Your station is impressive," Kira attempted conversation. "The engineering must have been complex." Jackson looked surprised. She addressed him. "The War Regent believes in shows of strength. Enemies must see our power before contemplating resistance. But we're not enemies. We come seeking to learn about your people and share our culture." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Confusion or curiosity? "You speak of peace as if it were valuable. In Corvan culture, peace is simply the absence of worthy enemies. In alien culture, peace is the foundation for all achievements. Our greatest art, scientific discoveries, philosophical insights, all grew from peaceful society." Jackson fell quiet, and Kira sensed she had challenged his worldview. The throne room was vast and intimidating, designed to make visitors feel powerless. War Regent Dryas sat on an elaborate throne made from conquered ship fragments, surrounded by generals and admirals watching with amusement and contempt. "Approach," Dryas commanded. Kira walked to the chamber's center, stopping before the assembled leadership with calm dignity. "Honored War Regent," she began clearly, "I am Kira Thorne, representing the Alien Republic. We come in peace, hoping to establish relations based on mutual respect and shared prosperity." She activated her crystalline case, filling the air with holographic displays of beautiful alien cities, art, music, and scientific achievements. "We offer knowledge of peaceful governance, advances in healing, and cultural treasures. We also bring trade route maps and proposals for cultural exchange." The throne room fell silent. Then Darius began to laugh. It started low, growing into full-throated laughter echoing off the walls. His subordinates joined in until the chamber filled with mocking amusement. "Art and music, cultural exchange," Darius managed between laughs. "Child, do you know who you're addressing?" His laughter died, replaced by a cold smile. "We are the Corvan Empire. We've conquered 47 star systems. Our fleets have reduced civilizations to asteroid dust. You come in your pretty ship, wearing soft robes, speaking of peace, offering trinkets, and expecting equal treatment." Kira flushed but kept her voice steady. We offer friendship freely. Every species was once young and learning. We ask only. The chance to prove cooperation serves everyone better than conquest. Cooperation is what the weak offer when they lack strength to resist. Darius stepped closer. Your republic enjoyed peace because no true power noticed you. That time has ended. Kira's heart sank. If you won't accept friendship, we ask only that you leave us in peace. Oh, we'll give you peace, the eternal peace of the conquered. You have two choices: surrender as a vassal state, serving our empire, or refuse and learn what happens to species too foolish to recognize superior strength. And if we refuse, then you face the consequences. The Third Conquest Fleet consists of 500 warships and can reduce your republic to radioactive debris within months. You have 60 days to choose. Corpses make poor subjects. As they were escorted back to their ship, Corvin laughter still echoed in Kira's ears. All her hopes for peaceful diplomacy lay in ruins. Jackson walked behind the escort, observing the young diplomat. Throughout the humiliation, she had maintained dignity with unexpected grace. Most beings either cowered or blustered when facing Corvin might. This Kira had done neither. At the docking bay, Kira paused and turned back, her blue eyes meeting his dark ones. He saw not fear or hatred, but deep sadness encompassing disappointment for both their peoples. First Blade Reeve, she said quietly, I hope someday your people will discover what mine learned, that the strongest civilizations are built not on enemies' bones, but on friendship's foundation. She disappeared into her ship. Jackson watched. The Serenity's promise undock, carrying the ultimatum and Hope's death. That night, alone in his quarters, Jackson found himself thinking about her words. He had been raised on Corvin glory stories, taught that strength was the only virtue and conquest the superior's natural right. But something about Kira Thorne challenged those beliefs. For the first time in his life, Jackson wondered whether the Corvin way was truly the only way, and somewhere in space, traveling toward a republic facing an impossible choice. Kira wondered the same about peace in a galaxy choosing war. The 60-day countdown had begun. Jackson Reeve stood at attention in the War Council chamber, but his mind kept drifting to a pair of blue eyes that had looked at him with such profound sadness. 3 days had passed since the alien delegation's departure, and he couldn't shake the memory of Kira Thorne's final words. First Blade Reeve, War Regent Darius's sharp voice cut through his reverie. I asked for your assessment of the alien military capabilities. Jackson straightened, forcing his attention back to the holographic displays showing intelligence data about the alien republic. Minimal defensive capabilities, War Regent. Their fleet consists primarily of exploration and research vessels. No significant military installations detected. Excellent. Darius smiled coldly. A quick conquest. Then, Admiral Voss, prepare the Third Fleet for departure in 50 days. I want this finished before they have time to mount any meaningful resistance. As the other officers discussed invasion strategies, Jackson found himself remembering not the tactical briefings, but the way Kira had spoken about her people's achievements, art, music, healing technologies, philosophical insights, things that had no place in Corvin society, but somehow seemed more valuable than all their military conquests. After the meeting, Jackson retreated to his quarters in the military district of Corvin Prime, the Empire's capital world. The gray metal walls were decorated only with his service commendations and ceremonial weapons, a stark reflection of the life he had been bred for. As the son of a decorated general, he had been groomed from birth to serve the Empire's expansion. Excellence in combat, unwavering loyalty, absolute obedience. These were the virtues that defined a Corvin warrior. So why did he feel so empty? His door chimed, and his training partner, Marcus Vega, entered without waiting for permission. You've been distracted since the diplomatic meeting, Marcus observed, settling into the room's single chair. The soft aliens got under your skin. Jackson turned from his window overlooking the military academy where young Corvins trained for war. Did you listen to what she said? About peace being a foundation for achievement, Marcus laughed. Typical conquered species philosophy. They convince themselves that weakness is virtue, because they lack the strength to take what they want. He leaned forward. You're not seriously questioning our ways because of one pretty alien diplomat, are you? She wasn't just pretty, Jackson said quietly. She was genuine. When the war regent mocked her, when everyone laughed, she didn't break. She maintained her dignity and still spoke of hope for both our peoples. Dignity, Marcus stood, his voice growing sharp. Jackson, you're talking like someone who's forgotten what we are. We're warriors, conquerors. We don't find virtue in our enemies, we crush them. After Marcus left, Jackson lay on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling. For 28 years, he had never questioned the Corvan way. He had excelled in combat training, risen through the ranks, earned his ritual scars in battles against lesser species. But something had shifted when he watched Kira speak of cooperation and friendship, as if they were natural laws rather than naive fantasies. He activated his personal terminal and accessed the public records of the diplomatic meeting. The official report described the alien delegation as predictably weak and accommodating, offering meaningless cultural exchanges in exchange for protection they do not deserve. But Jackson found himself studying the security footage, watching Kira's graceful movements, the way her voice remained steady even when surrounded by hostility. On impulse, he accessed the intelligence files on the Alien Republic. What he found surprised him. Their worlds were indeed peaceful, but they weren't primitive. Their cities were architectural marvels that seemed to grow organically from their landscapes. Their technology, while not militarized, showed innovations in energy production, environmental restoration, and medical science that the Corvan Empire had never achieved. Most intriguingly, their historical records showed no internal wars for over 3 centuries, something unthinkable in Corvan society. Computer, he said carefully, display cultural analysis of alien society. The data that emerged painted a picture of a civilization built on principles entirely foreign to Corvan thought. Conflicts were resolved through dialogue and compromise. Resources were shared based on need rather than strength. Leadership was earned through wisdom and service rather than conquest. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. The aliens had built something that worked, something that had produced genuine prosperity and happiness for billions of beings. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Jackson's heart skipped when he saw it was a personal communication from his father, General Thane Reeve, currently commanding occupation forces in the recently conquered Helios system. Son, his father's weathered face appeared on the screen. I heard you served as escort for the alien delegation. Good experience for understanding our enemy's weaknesses. Remember, mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. These peaceful species must learn their place, or they become threats to everything we've built. Jackson stared at the message long after it ended. Everything we've built. What exactly had the Corvan Empire built? They had conquered worlds, enslaved populations, harvested resources, but had they actually created anything of lasting value? The aliens spoke of art and music and philosophical insights. What did the Corvans have to show for their millennia of warfare besides more territory to defend and more enemies to suppress? He found himself accessing the communication logs from Kira's ship. Standard protocol required monitoring all diplomatic transmissions, which meant he could review her final report to the Alien Council. What he heard made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. The Corvan Empire has chosen conquest over cooperation, Kira's voice said, calm despite the weight of the news she carried. War Regent Dryas has given us 60 days to surrender or face annihilation. I believe he means what he says. Their military capabilities far exceed our own. There was a pause, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of deep sadness. What troubles me most is not their strength, but their certainty that strength is all that matters. They've built a society that sees friendship as weakness and peace as failure. I cannot help but wonder what they might have become if they had chosen a different path. Another pause, longer this time. I met a warrior named Jackson Reeve. For just a moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes, doubt, perhaps, or curiosity, about another way of living. If there are others like him in the Empire, maybe there's still hope for understanding, but we cannot count on hope alone. We must prepare for war. Jackson sat in stunned silence. She had noticed him. More than that, she had seen something in him that he was only beginning to recognize in himself, the possibility that there might be another way to live, another definition of strength. Over the following weeks, as the Corvin fleet prepared for invasion, Jackson found himself researching everything he could about alien culture. Their poetry spoke of love and beauty in ways that made his warrior's heart ache with longing. Their music seemed to reach something deep inside him that had been sleeping all his life. Their philosophy offered answers to questions he had never been allowed to ask. But it was the thought of Kira herself that truly haunted him. In quiet moments between training sessions, he found himself remembering the way she had looked at him, not with fear or hatred, but with a kind of gentle hope that suggested she saw something worthwhile in him despite everything he represented. 25 days remained until the invasion fleet departed. Jackson stood once again at his window, watching young Corvins learn to kill with maximum efficiency. But now he saw them differently, not as the next generation of glorious warriors, but as children being shaped into instruments of destruction when they might have been taught to create beauty instead. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month before, opening a secure channel on an encrypted frequency. He began composing a message to a small exploration ship that intelligence reported was conducting research missions near the border between Corvin and alien space. To Kira Thorne of the Alien Republic, he typed, his hands trembling slightly. This is Jackson Reeve. I hope this message finds you well. I have been thinking about our conversation, about peace as a foundation for achievement. I believe you were right to be sad for both our peoples. Perhaps it is not too late for understanding. He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. With that single transmission, he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He was no longer just a Corvin warrior following orders. He was a man reaching across the void toward something that might, if he was very lucky, reach back somewhere in space, racing to prepare her people for war. Kira Thorne would soon receive a message that would change everything. Kira stood in the observatory of the research station Peaceful Horizon, staring at the swirling nebula that marked the boundary between alien and neutral space. 20 days had passed since she delivered the Corvin ultimatum to the Council of Wisdom, and those days had transformed her peaceful republic into something she barely recognized. Shipyards that once built exploration vessels now worked frantically to retrofit them with defensive systems. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to healing were being asked to develop weapons. Children were being evacuated from border worlds. The soft chime of an incoming message drew her from her melancholy thoughts. She expected another status report from the council, but the message header made her heart race. From Jackson Reeve. Personal communication, encrypted. Her hands trembled as she opened it. To Kira Thorne of the Alien Republic, this is Jackson Reeve. I hope this message finds you well. I have been thinking about our conversation, about peace as a foundation for achievement. I believe you were right to be sad for both our peoples. Perhaps it is not too late for understanding. Kira read the message 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. A Corvin warrior, reaching across the void with words of understanding rather than conquest. She had seen something in his eyes during that terrible diplomatic meeting, a flicker of doubt, a moment of connection, but she had convinced herself it was wishful thinking. She spent an hour crafting her reply, choosing each word carefully. Jackson, your message brings the first hope I've felt since leaving your station. I have watched my people prepare for war they never wanted, and my heart breaks for what both our civilizations are about to lose. If you truly believe understanding is possible, then perhaps we can find a way to prevent this tragedy. What followed was a correspondence that began cautiously, but quickly deepened into something neither had expected. Jackson wrote about his growing doubts regarding Corvin philosophy, his fascination with alien culture, and his horror at watching the invasion fleet prepare. Kira shared her fears for her people, her admiration for the courage it must have taken him to reach out, and her growing belief that he represented something better than the empire he served. Their messages became more frequent, more personal. Jackson described his sterile quarters and asked about her world's famous crystal gardens. Kira told him about the poetry that had gotten her through diplomatic training, and discovered he had been secretly reading alien literature through captured data files. They shared memories of childhood, dreams they had never spoken aloud, and fears about the future racing toward them. 2 weeks into their correspondence, Jackson made a proposal that stopped Kira's breath. There's an abandoned mining station in the neutral zone, Outpost Serenity. If you could meet me there, perhaps we could find a way to prevent this war. Every rational part of Kira's mind screamed against it. Meeting secretly with an enemy officer could be considered treason. But when she closed her eyes, she saw not an enemy but a man reaching across an impossible divide for connection and understanding. 3 days later, Kira sat alone in a small shuttle, her heart pounding as the derelict mining station appeared on her screens. The Outpost Serenity hung, dark and silent in space, its corridors powered only by emergency systems. As she docked, she wondered if she was making the greatest mistake of her life. Jackson was waiting in the station's observation lounge, out of his intimidating black armor and wearing simple civilian clothes that made him look younger, more vulnerable. When their eyes met, something electric passed between them, recognition of a connection that had been building. Through weeks of messages, "I wasn't sure you would come," he said softly. "I wasn't sure either," Kira admitted, "but I had to try. My people are preparing to die for their freedom. Your people are preparing to kill for conquest. There has to be another way." They talked for hours, walking through the empty corridors of the abandoned station. Jackson spoke of his growing revulsion at Corvan brutality, his amazement at discovering alien achievements, his desperate hope that peace might still be possible. Kira shared her anguish at watching her peaceful society arm for war, her fear that victory or defeat would equally destroy everything beautiful about her culture. In 3 days, the invasion fleet departs, Jackson told her as they stood together watching the stars through a cracked viewport. "I've tried to find allies among my fellow officers, but they see my doubts as weakness. They're convinced that showing mercy would make the Empire appear vulnerable. And my people believe that surrender would mean the end of everything that makes us who we are," Kira replied. "The Council has voted for resistance, even knowing the cost." Jackson turned to face her, and in the dim emergency lighting, his scarred features looked both fierce and gentle. What if there were another option? What if we could prove that cooperation truly is stronger than conquest? How? Kira asked, though her heart was already racing with possibilities. "I don't know yet," Jackson admitted, "but standing here with you, talking to someone who sees the universe as a place of beauty rather than a battlefield to be won, I believe we can find a way." Without thinking, Kira reached out and touched his face, tracing one of the ritual scars that marked his rank. "These were cut to show your readiness to kill for the Empire." "Yes," Jackson said quietly, "but when I look at them now, I see someone brave enough to risk everything for peace." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I see someone I could love." The words hung between them like a bridge spanning the void between their worlds. Then Jackson's hand covered hers, and the distance between warrior and diplomat, conqueror and peacemaker, collapsed into nothing. They met twice more in the following weeks, each encounter deepening both their love and their desperation to prevent the approaching war. They shared plans, hopes, and finally, in the shadow of the invasion fleet's departure, a kiss that felt like sealing a pact written in starlight. "Promise me," Kira whispered against his lips as they prepared to return to their respective peoples, "that whatever happens, you'll remember there's another way to be strong. Promise me." Jackson replied, "That you'll remember some Corvans dream of building instead of destroying." As their ships departed the abandoned station for the last time, both carried with them a love that defied every law of their civilizations, and a determination to prove that understanding could triumph over hatred. The invasion fleet was launching, but the real battle for the future had only just begun. War Regent Dryas Core stood on the command bridge of his flagship Imperial Dominance, watching the final preparations for what he expected to be the Empire's easiest conquest in decades. The massive dreadnought's viewports showed nearly 500 warships arranged in perfect formation, enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. Behind them stretched supply lines and troop transports, ready to establish permanent occupation of alien space. Final intelligence reports, War Regent. Admiral Voss approached with a data tablet. Long-range scouts confirm the aliens have attempted to militarize some civilian vessels, but their defensive capabilities remain laughably inadequate. Their largest warship has the firepower of one of our escort frigates. Darius smiled coldly. 60 days had passed since he gave the Alien Republic their ultimatum, and apparently they had chosen the path of feudal resistance. So much the better. Conquered peoples who surrendered without a fight often retain dangerous ideas about eventual rebellion. Those who fought and lost learned permanent lessons about the futility of opposing. Corvin might. Time to target, he asked. 18 hours to the alien border, 6 more to their capital system, Admiral Voss replied. At our current pace, we'll be accepting their surrender before the next sleep cycle. No surrender, Darius corrected sharply. These soft fools chose to reject our generous offer. They will learn what happens to species who mistake Corvin patience for weakness, reduce their military capabilities completely, occupy their major worlds, and begin processing their population for labor assignments. As the fleet engaged its faster-than-light drives, Darius reflected on the satisfaction of this moment. The alien ambassador's naive speeches about cooperation and understanding had provided amusing entertainment, but now came the inevitable conclusion. He wondered briefly about that young diplomat, Kira something, and whether she would be among the survivors selected for re-education programs. Her spirit might prove useful once properly broken and redirected towards serving the Empire. 18 hours later, the Corvin Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of alien territory. What they found was exactly what intelligence had predicted. A scattered collection of hastily modified civilian ships attempting to form defensive lines around key worlds. Darius actually laughed aloud at the sight. Look at them, he announced to his bridge crew. Exploration vessels with welded-on weapon pods, cargo haulers carrying missile racks, passenger liners pretending to be battleships. This will be finished. Before it begins, he opened a general communication channel to the alien fleet. This is War Regent Darius Core of the Corvin Empire. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare for boarding. Resistance is futile and will only increase the suffering of your civilian populations. The response came from a familiar voice that made his smile widen. This is Ambassador Kira Thorne, speaking for the Alien Republic. We will not submit to slavery. We choose freedom. Whatever the cost, then you choose death, Darius replied. All ships, open fire. Show these fools the price of defying the Empire. The first volleys of Corvin plasma fire lit up space like deadly fireworks, and Darius watched with satisfaction as several alien vessels exploded immediately. Their improvised shields failed under the first impact, their civilian hulls cracking like eggshells within minutes. A third of the defending fleet was nothing but expanding clouds of debris. But then something unexpected happened. The space around the Corvin fleet suddenly filled with new contacts, thousands of them appearing from seemingly empty void. Sleek vessels emerged from advanced stealth fields, their hulls gleaming with technology that registered as completely unknown to Corvin sensors. These weren't the crude defensive platforms intelligence had expected. These were purpose-built warships whose energy signatures made Darius's blood run cold. Admiral, his sensor operator called out in panic. Unknown vessels decloaking throughout the system, detecting massive energy buildup from multiple sources. The first alien counterattack caught the Corvin fleet completely off guard. Beams of coherent energy, unlike anything in Imperial databases, sliced through their ship's shields, as if they were tissue paper. Explosions blossomed across the invasion fleet as vessels that had conquered dozens of star systems died in seconds. Impossible. Darius snarled. Our intelligence showed no advanced military technology, sir. Admiral Voss's voice was tight with fear. They must have been hiding their true capabilities. These aren't hastily converted civilian ships. They're purpose-built weapons platforms, using technology we don't understand. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Corvin military history. For generations, the Empire had fought primitive, species armed with crude projectile weapons and basic energy shields. The aliens were demonstrating mastery of quantum manipulation, gravity wells that could crush battleships, and defensive systems that seemed to predict attack vectors before shots were fired. How is this possible? Darius demanded as another squadron of his ships vanished in brilliant flashes. They're supposed to be peaceful. They are peaceful. Came a new voice over the communication system. Darius turned to see Jackson Reeve on an auxiliary screen, but he wasn't aboard a Corvan vessel. He stood on what appeared to be an alien bridge, wearing unfamiliar uniform insignia. They're peaceful by choice, not because they lack the ability to defend themselves. Traitor, Darius's face flushed with rage. I should have known your weakness would lead to betrayal, not betrayal, Jackson replied calmly. Understanding. The aliens developed this technology decades ago, but chose never to use it aggressively. They hoped they would never need it at all. You forced their hand. The tide of battle continued to turn against the Corvan fleet. Their numerical advantage meant nothing when alien weapons could disable multiple ships with each shot. Worse, the defenders seemed to know exactly where the Corvan fleet would maneuver, countering every tactical formation with precision. That suggested intimate knowledge of Imperial doctrine. War Regent, Admiral Voss's voice cracked with strain. We've lost over half the fleet. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Darius stared at the tactical display showing the destruction of his invincible armada. Centuries of Corvan military superiority were crumbling before his eyes. These soft, peaceful aliens had lured him into a trap baited with their own apparent weakness. Sir, his communications officer called out. Priority message from Corvan Prime. We're detecting similar fleets emerging throughout Imperial space. The aliens aren't just defending themselves, they're striking our home systems. The full scope of his miscalculation hit Darius like a physical blow. The aliens hadn't spent 60 days preparing a desperate last stand. They had used that time to position their hidden fleets for a coordinated assault on the Empire itself. While he had been planning conquest, they had been planning liberation, not just for themselves, but for every species the Corvans had ever enslaved. All ships, he ordered through gritted teeth. Emergency retreat to Imperial space. Maximum burn, as the remnants of his once mighty fleet fled toward home, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed vessels and thousands of dead warriors. Darius finally understood the true meaning of Kira Thorne's words about peace being a foundation for achievement. The aliens had achieved something the Corvan Empire never could, the power to defend not through aggression, but through the willing cooperation of dozens of species who had secretly prepared for this moment. The price of arrogance was about to be paid in full, and the galaxy would never be the same. The war room on Corvan Prime had never been so quiet. War Regent Darius Kor stared at the holographic display, showing the devastation of his once mighty empire. In 3 weeks of fighting, the Alien Republic and their secret alliance had liberated 47 conquered worlds, disabled half the Imperial fleet, and reduced the proud Corvan military to desperate defensive positions round their core systems. Sir, Admiral Voss's voice was hollow with defeat. We're receiving another transmission from the alien fleet. They're requesting negotiations. Darius laughed bitterly. Requesting? They have us surrounded and outgunned. They could finish us whenever they choose. He paused, studying the tactical display. What do they want? They want to talk about peace, sir. They say they never intended to destroy the Corvan people, only to free those we had enslaved. The irony was not lost on Darius. The species he had dismissed as weak and naive were now offering him the same choice he had given them: surrender or destruction. But where he had demanded submission, they offered transformation. Put them through, he said finally. The main screen flickered to life, showing not the expected scene of alien military commanders, but a simple conference room aboard a neutral space station. Kira Thorne sat at one side of a curved table, her diplomatic robes replaced by practical civilian clothing. Across from her sat a figure that made Darius's blood boil with rage and confusion: Jackson Reeve, former First Blade of the Crimson Legion, now apparently serving as some kind of liaison between the two peoples. War Regent Darius, Kira began. her voice carrying the same calm dignity he remembered from their first meeting. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us." "Speak," Darius snarled. "Your fleets have my empire surrounded. My people are starving. On blockaded worlds. What is there to discuss?" "The future," Jackson said quietly. "The choice between continued destruction and the possibility of something better." "Don't lecture me about choices, traitor." Darius's composure cracked. "You abandoned your own people for alien promises." "I found my people," Jackson replied without flinching, "not defined by species or territory, but by shared values. Kira taught me that strength can be used to protect rather than conquer, to build rather than destroy." Kira leaned forward, her blue eyes intense with emotion. "Darius, we didn't want this war, even now. With victory within our grasp, we don't want to destroy the Corvan people. You have a proud culture, a strong heritage. Imagine what you could accomplish if that strength was directed toward creation instead of conquest." "Pretty words," Darius said coldly. "But what are you actually proposing?" "Complete demilitarization of the Empire," Kira replied. "Liberation of all enslaved species. Dissolution of the conquest fleets. In return, we offer full membership in the Galactic Cooperation Council, access to advanced technology for peaceful purposes, and assistance in transforming your economy from one based on exploitation to one based on trade and innovation." Darius stared at them in disbelief. "You're asking us to abandon everything we are." "We're asking you to become everything you could be," Jackson said. "Kira showed me archives of Corvan history from before the Empire, when your people were explorers and builders, not just conquerors. You had art, music, philosophy. The warrior culture consumed all of that. But it doesn't have to stay consumed." For several long moments, the transmission was silent. Finally, Darius spoke in a voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "And if we refuse," Kira's expression grew sad, "then you will face the same choice you gave us, extinction or servitude. But this time, 47 liberated species will ensure the choice is permanent." The transmission ended, leaving Darius alone with his thoughts and the weight of impossible decisions. Over the following days, as reports came in of Corvan worlds beginning to revolt against their own military governors, he found himself thinking about the relationship between the alien diplomat and his former officer. They had found something that transcended the artificial barriers between their peoples. Not just love, but a shared vision of what the galaxy could become. Their union had become a symbol to both species, proof that understanding was possible, that the hatred between their civilizations was not inevitable. 3 weeks later, Darius signed the Treaty of New Beginnings aboard the neutral station where peace negotiations had taken place. The ceremony was simple but profound. Representatives from dozens of formerly enslaved species watched as the Corvan Empire formally dissolved itself, and its leaders committed to building something entirely new. Kira and Jackson stood together as witnesses, their hands intertwined, no longer hiding their relationship but celebrating it as the bridge that had made peace possible. The ritual scars on Jackson's temples had been supplemented with new markings, alien symbols representing growth, harmony, and the choice to heal rather than harm. "Do you think it will work?" Kira asked quietly as they watched former enemies shake hands and begin planning joint colonies. "It has to," Jackson replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "We've proven that love can cross any divide. Now we just have to teach the rest of the galaxy what we learned." 5 years later, the former Corvan territories had become the fastest growing region in galactic space. Ex-warriors found new purpose as engineers, teachers, and artists. The weapons factories that had once produced instruments of conquest now created terraforming equipment and exploration vessels. Kira and Jackson married in a ceremony that blended traditions from both cultures, officiated by representatives from dozens of species. Their wedding became a galactic holiday, Liberation Day, commemorating not just the end of Corvan oppression, but the triumph of understanding over hatred. They settled on New Harmony, a world jointly terraformed by alien technology and Corvan engineering, where their children would grow up learning that strength and gentleness were not opposites, but partners. Their love story had become legend, but more importantly, It had become proof that the galaxy's greatest conflicts could be resolved, not through superior firepower, but through the simple recognition that every being deserved dignity, freedom, and the chance to choose their own path among the stars. The universe was vast enough for all kinds of strength, and love had conquered all.